Hey y'all, welcome to Hillbilly Garage. Well, we got one of the last pieces to our puzzle on our little white dump truck. Got another fan controller. I tried to order just one for a single, but I ordered it, paid for it, and it got canceled, so I had to reorder. So I ended up having to get a dual, but it doesn't matter because I'm only going to use it for one fan. Because I still have the number one fan hooked here, I'll just make this the number two fan. I know it's starting to look a little busy in here, but I want to keep all the wiring centrally located. Now on this controller, um, like I said, it is a dual fan. So what you have is you have your three larger wires. Your red one in the middle is the main 12 volt input. You hook it directly to the battery, which will come right off of this post because this is fed off of that junction block over there. So this is constant 12 volt hot. So that'll be our main input power feed.
Is it always red?
No, red is not always the positive color, but it is. If you see something red, then that generally means it is positive. But and the reason I say that is this is a positive lead that would go to number two fan if we were using this for two, but I went ahead and pulled the fuse and I'm going to just deadhead this. I'm not going to cut it off because I don't want to destroy it, but I'll blank it out. This is the positive lead that will supply power to the number two fan. Have its own fuse. So those are your three main hots that are on this apparatus. And then down here on the side, you have your temperature probe, which will go in the fins of the radiator. You have a green wire that if you have air conditioning on your vehicle, you tap this into.
Hold on a minute. The air compressor just came on. Air compressors. They're
Oh,
loud.
yeah. Anyway, like we were saying, this green wire would go into the trigger wire that engages your air conditioner clutch so that when the air conditioner kicks on, it will trigger the relay, turn the fan on. And then, of course, your black wire is your main ground. The ground's all this solenoid. And then your yellow wire is the accessory power, which will go right here. And what that does is this actually energizes the relay circuits so that when you turn the key off on a truck, it'll take power away from the fans and turn them off, even if the relay is engaged and has it running. So that's how the wiring pans out. Like I said, we're not using this as a two wire, and we're not using this as an AC because this truck doesn't have it. So these two wires I will tape off and deadhead because they won't be used, and then we'll be tapping these in. But let me get some connectors and stuff together and I'll be right back. All right, I'm going to start with the ground wire. It's not like that is an absolute necessity or anything, but it's always a good place to start because if you don't ground it, it ain't gonna work. So I'm laying this ground wire out so I can tie it on to the rest of what I've built here. And I'm gonna go ahead and mount it to this pin, so I'm gonna cut my wire about right here. And take my wire strippers. That's great. Skin back just a little bit. Twist the end up nice and pretty.
Where'd it go? 'Cause I can't see it. Oh, there it is. Okay. Now, what do you think? Should I cut it off? Or should I leave it?
All right. I'm gonna take my wire strippers. That's great. Skin back just a little bit. Twist the end up nice and pretty.
'Cause Where'd it go? Hold on a minute, we lost something.
Did it fall with whatever else went?
Oh, it's on my foot. Flip flops. Save the day.
I'm using a shrink wrap connector here, but it's a ground wire, so we're not really going to worry about shrink wrapping it. But whenever you're using metal crimp-ons, especially this type, I don't know if y'all can see it in there, but there's a slit right there underneath the plastic. When they make these things, of course, they have to bring those two ends around to make a loop. So when you use the jaws of your crimpers, you want to put the raised rounded part on the opposite side of the slit. So if my slit is facing up, I got my round raised spot going down. Make sure your wire gets inserted all the way in. Try to make sure you can see a little bit of it poking through right there.
Yep.
And then you crimp. And you tug on it, not like gorilla strength, but you want to make sure that you can't pull it back off. And the wrench is still on the floor. And we're going to go ahead and tie it on with this other ground lead, which there's no particular rhyme or reason for which one I chose. It was just this one. Because all of these are all tied to the same bus bar. So you're getting the same ground, which it's actually, this cable goes to the frame of the truck. So everything is essentially grounded to the frame. Speaking of grounds, you want to make sure that you have grounds between your engine block and the frame, between the starter and the frame, the body and the frame. And you might think, well, I mean, if everything's bolted together, why does it all need to be grounded? Well, sometimes those connections are not enough to make sure everything is grounded. And I mean, you don't want to get ridiculously crazy, but you can't really overdo the grounds. But you do want to make sure that each individual piece is grounded to each other and to the frame. There's one that goes to the body of the block, and there's one that goes from the block to the frame, the battery to the frame, all of this to the frame. Got to make sure you got good grounds. And this is our sensor wire. I'm going to have to undo the radiator and the fan in order to get to that one. Next thing I want to do is I want to make up my lead that is going to feed number 2 fan, which is this connector right here, because this was number 2 on the original setup. Now granted, we are going to have 2 orange wires feeding 1 and 2, but the relays are marked 1, and then I'll mark this one number 2. So this one has a male blade connector, so we need to put a female blade connector on that one.
Explain why they're different colors.
What?
Like that one's blue and the other one you had was pink.
Oh, good question.
Some of them are yellow.
This is for your mid-size wires. Honestly, I forget what the numbers are, but it's 12 to 14 gauge, 16 sometimes. Now, aluminum wire, the reason I could use a pink one on this is aluminum wire is a little bit less, smaller stranded, but the same power capability. But the yellow connectors are for larger wires. When you get 12 gauge, 12, 10, sometimes 14, it just depends. But the more stranded wire, the higher gauge, which actually means a lower number, then you have to go with a bigger connector. But so like I said, this one has a male end already on it, and I want to make this connection, so I have to put a female on to my power wire. And you don't always, I mean, you don't want to have like ridiculous amounts of wire left over. This was from the original stuff that ran these headlights. I just didn't want to cut it unnecessarily just to splice it back. But you want to make sure you leave yourself a little bit of slack, a little bit of room in case, you ever have to replace a connector or something. But just not get crazy leaving all kinds of wires. So when you tie things together, you can make them look a lot better when they run along with each other. So we trim that. Back off some insulation. Twist it up. And you can see this gets a thicker wire, bigger than that ground wire, which some people, including me, think that that's a backwards way of thinking. Ground, in my opinion, should be bigger, but obviously a lot of people don't agree with that opinion, because you buy these parts and they come with little bitty ground wires. Now these particular connectors, you can't really see a slit in the way that it's made. What I always do is I imagine that the slit is on the bottom side of the connector, which is where they are on the other types. So I put my raised part of my jaw opposite of that, make sure it's in tight, squeeze, make sure it's connected, and then we plug up our fan. That's going to lay out there pretty nice. I'll tie those up in a few minutes. Now, all right, y'all. I got my main hot power wire that's tied into my lug over there. But for safety purposes, we'll go ahead and disconnect this battery. I already laid a wrench over there and got me a little fireworks. We don't want no more of that. But we've got our main red hot lead. This is actually what supplies power to the fans when the relays engage. So make that connection about right here. Go to this wire here. My strippers and crimpers, please. slide the connector down onto our shorter wire because it's harder to work in here. Make that crimp. I usually try when I can't find those little slits we were talking about earlier. I just try to put my little button crimps on the same side. But that's just me because it just makes it look a little better, that's all. And I use one of these shrink connectors on this positive wire so that I can shrink tubing with my little flame torch here. Shrink it down. Helps to protect it from moisture and whatever else, but it also helps to keep the wires from being able to separate. But it might be overkill, but I either use more shrink tubing or I use black tape. And to be perfectly honest, most of the time it's black tape. That's just an old school thing, you know. Been doing that since way before shrink tubing was even a thing. Something always rings in my head. The guy I worked with when I was in the Army, he outranked me. He'd been a mechanic in the Army longer than me, and we were doing some electrical work out in the field, and he went back and forth, taping. And I asked him, I said, man, ain't you using an awful lot of tape? He said, one, we get this tape for free, and no, there ain't no such thing as using too much tape. So, you know, just make sure you get several good layers, especially on your hot leads. And if you make your connections and your grounds and your hot leads end up laying next to each other, see, because I'm going to tie this down here, and I want to make sure that there ain't nothing going to be able to make contact with that connection in there at any point so that we don't have a short. Okay, so that one's going to work out pretty good. We already made our connection that's going to do our primary for our fan. We got our ground hooked up. Now what we need is our trigger wire. Let me get a screwdriver here. Now this bus bar that I have back here on the firewall, this is my switched power. This energizes off of the key switch. In this midst of all these original factory wires, I was blessed to have found one that was key switched hot. They went to whatever the original setup was on this vehicle. And actually, according to the VIN number, this truck started its life as a diesel. When it crossed over to gas, I haven't got a clue. But that's why there are some excess wires and leftover wires, because things had to be rerouted when they switched it to gas. But like I said, it left me with a switched power wire that energizes this bus bar and lets me pick up power to energize my relays. And yes, your eyes are not deceiving you. I have a yellow wire with a green stripe. Unfortunately, I ran out of straight yellow wire. So, but this is going to be okay because actually I got yellow goes to fan 1 and yellow with green tracer goes to fan 2. So we can all pretend like I planned that like that. Now y'all know I'm fibbing, but it still works out okay.
Wiring is something you should not mess with if you don't know what you're doing, right?
Well, no, yeah, well, I mean, at least get a little coaching or look up some wiring diagrams. I am no expert by no means. But when I was in the military, we tore stuff up, tore lights off.
Made your own gaskets.
Yeah, made our own gaskets. So yeah, but as far as the wiring goes, it was a pretty common thing, especially when we were on field exercise. You know, you got to be able to trace these wires down, and it might even be the reason why I'm not too worried and upset about the color for situations, because on a military vehicle, every wire is black. The entire wiring harness. At least it was when I was a mechanic. They may have changed that. But the wires all had number tags on them. And you had tags throughout it, but at both terminating ends, there was a little tag that tells you what number that wire is. And then you had to follow the schematic to know what number wire fed and led to what particular component. So that always made wiring very interesting. Well, at least we didn't have to carry around big spools of all kind of color wire because it was just all black. Maybe they did that to keep it subdued at night. Or maybe it's just because that's what made it easy. Okay. So we've got our trigger wire that will energize our relays. We've got our power wire that will make our fan run. We got our main power wire that will supply the entire unit. We got our ground wire. We're not using the air conditioner. We're not using fan number 2.
So all that's left is the probe that goes in the radiator, right?
So now, yes, I will tie this up here in a little bit. But yeah, now we'll be right back while I get this fan out of the way. All right, and all we're going to do here is this is the little probe that will live in between the water ribs there in the radiator core. Alrighty, Now we just need to get our temperature probe set up. That's what this little flashy looking little doohickey is. But what we have to do first is we're going to have to insert this keeper strap through the core and the radiator. So to bring it out, you're going to come from the front side. You put this little pad on there so that when it's tight, it's not rubbing holes in your core. And it just goes between the fins. Don't worry, you're not hurting anything by doing that. This occurred to me, I did not share with y'all my handy dandy little LS radiator mounts. What I did is I welded nuts to the core support, and I put all thread in there with jam nuts, and the bottom feet on the radiator actually sit in the bottom level of the core support, and then you'll see that the radiator slides back on these two. Bushing and a washer and two nuts. Just tighten these down till you start to see your little bushings squish up a little bit. Tighten in the jam nut.
A little louder.
Tighten the two nuts together, and they will keep each other from backing off. So washer, and the way they're adjusted is the two jam nuts on the back side keep the radiator from actually contacting the core support. Again, we just tighten that one down till we start seeing our rubber bushings to squish up a little bit. 2 wrenches, 2 nuts, tighten them together. The radiator is secure. Now, on the front side here, what we need to do is you take like a 16 penny nail, and you want to go into the ribs between the cores and just wiggle you out a little hole, and that hole is for your probe to slide into, and you put it right next to your zip tie strap, because this cap right here with another one of these little soft sticky tabs to it is gonna do 2 things: keep that probe from being able to walk around and keep it from being able to back out, and keep any of this from rubbing holes in the radiator. Just tighten that down, nice and secure.
Right there on the air thing.
Yep. Cut away my excess, and probe is installed. And then of course the fan is going to set back up in the little clips that are on the front of the radiator. And the fan secures just exactly like the radiator. It's got the 2 jam nuts here that keep the fan from being able to contact the radiator core. Tighten her down till she's snug. I get my jam nut to start. There it goes. Hold the back nut. Tighten down the jam nut. And the beauty of the oil thread is it's not mended to those nuts. So if for some reason we need to get all this out of here, these studs will actually just unthread from the nut that is welded to the core support. So to get those out of the way. All right, that is reinstalled. Now, all that's left to do here is to tidy up these wires. Can't trim the probe wire because then you ruin it. So we're just going to have to tail up the excess here and make it look as pretty as we can. We'll tie all that up. We'll be right back. We'll check this out. All right, Joe. Got it hooked up. I believe I got it set to 180 degrees. Right now it's saying 80, but the instructions are not very clear on this, but I set it to Fahrenheit 180. Certainly that's not actual temperature. Could be though.
Yeah, pretty good.
Oh yeah, sounds real good. I still got a few adjustments I gotta make. Get it warmed up. I did put some gas in it, and I wasn't sure how much we had. And but it's gonna take a minute to warm up, so we'll be back. 38 degrees all in. That's pretty daggone good. All right, y'all. Well, we got the timing dialed in. We got her set about 38 all in at 3,000 RPM. Checked the idle mixture screws, and they were pretty happy where we had them set. I don't remember where. I think I set them at 1.5, 1 3/4, but it was within a quarter turn of where it liked it for the best vacuum. So she's running pretty sweet. The fans are cycling on and off independently. Number one fan doesn't really shut off much, but the two turns on and off, and so the fuses are holding, and everything's looking pretty good. And
It's about time to give her back.
we're just about ready to just put the hood back on it, and hook the speedometer cable up, and she'll be ready to go. So we appreciate all of you. Hopefully it wasn't too awful boring watching me stand here and look at the fans run, but I appreciate each and every one of you. Like and subscribe. Go visit Hillbilly Garage 1215.biz. Get you some t-shirts, stickers, Hillbilly Garage tools. And throw in some comments. Get some conversations going. I really love that part. We'll see y'all. Bye.